that you have people out of the country who cannot come home. They cannot come, they're stateless.
Finally, the Express is being fair and printing the truth.
We should be having trials, starting and finishing in 120 days.
What have you done to protect women and girls?
It must tell us that something is wrong.
This is Alibaba and 40 thieves in charge of Trinidad and Tobago today.
Live from the United National Congress social space, this is the virtual campaign.
Sing this song for represent justice. For represent justice. Sing this song for justice, peace and right.
We now have the national anthem of Trinidad and Tobago, followed by a prayer. Almighty God, Creator of the universe and embodiment of divine wisdom and light, we come before you with thanksgiving and praise. May your will be done in our nation as it is in the heavens. Please bless our political leader, party officials, activists, and all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Give us the grace to always see good, be good, and do good, and the courage to serve the people. Protect us as we stand against injustice and iniquity, and inspire our endeavors to find the right solutions to the problems that are affecting our fellow citizens. Grant that we may always work together with humility and respect for the greater happiness of all and the honor and glory of our country. Amen. Live from the United National Congress headquarters, welcome to the Virtual Report, streaming right now.
Tell the children the truth. Tell the children the truth. Tell the children the truth right now. Come on in.
In the image of the United National Congress, the former chairman of National Petroleum, Mr. Neil Gosai.
Good evening, my brothers and sisters. Good evening to everyone tonight. A special good evening to our political leader, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, SC, and a good evening to all our viewers. After the Minister of Finance, Colum Embert, and the Minister of Energy Industries, Stuart Young, are finished with NP, the entity as we knew it, it will be decimated, leaving all the employees dependents, companies, and thousands of the people that depend on NP operation at risk with no future and most definitely on the breadline, leaving it in the worst state it has ever been and worse off than Petrotrin. With the shutting down of Petrotrin and the setting up of Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, Paria is now the company that the government uses currently around the world to purchase fuel from traders and foreign dealers. And because refineries around the world refuses to offer Paria competitive prices and competitive credit facilities as it is relatively a new company and has no experience in the market, this puts our ability to purchase fuel at a disadvantage. When we are looking for the best prices to sell our fuel, Paria now has to purchase from traders who at times will have fuel and are looking for the best prices to sell their product. This means much more higher prices at the pumps once the liberalization of fuel is implemented by the Minister of Finance. The way the fuel subsidy works is foreign dealers sells to Paria at international prices, who in turn sells at wholesale prices to NP and Unipet, which were normally cheaper than the international price. Exploration and production companies pay royalties that is stipulated in their license as the share of the subsidy to the government, and that is what is the petroleum levy. Then the government was supposed to reimburse Petrotrin, now Paria, by paying the difference between the international price and the wholesale prices using its revenues and revenues from the petroleum levy. Petrotrin has also indicated in its calculations that the fuel subsidy owed by the government to Petrotrin before it shut down was approximately $775 million in 2017. Thus, the move to liberalize the fuel market has not been well received, with many calling it to be stayed off until the country is more financially stable. In fact, the Automotive Dealers Association in June of this year said that the timing was wrong and would further devastate the economy already weakened by the COVID-19 pandemic. The liberalization can effectively be another form of taxation to impose on the already burdened taxpayers, and there is no way to protect the public from overpricing at the pump and a cartel arrangement from the gas station dealers. So let me ask you, why is it now that we are looking to sell off prime property at locations across Trinidad and Tobago at a time where prices of the properties are at its lowest, and we are facing a pandemic, unprecedented losses of hardship for all citizens? This is exactly what National Petroleum Marketing Service stations are located. It's at the best spots, prime locations across the country. Further, the land that belongs to NP are the largest of its assets, with billions of dollars. And that is what is being targeted at this time. In the privatization of the service stations and the selling off of NP's assets, the company, it puts the company and its future in jeopardy without thinking of the employees, the families, the businesses that depends on NP's operation of the gas station throughout the country. Basically giving private interests huge state assets at this time where property values are very low because of the COVID-19 and this company is in the pandemic-stricken state the country is in. The National Petroleum Marketing Company business model is not the distribution of fuel anymore. That's possibly a misconception by the new Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, the Honorable Stuart Young, and the government. It's actually the franchisee arrangements with the petroleum dealers that is sustainable and part of NP's business that makes NP's more money in this market than any other business it has. National Petroleum Marketing Company of Trinidad and Tobago derives most of its profits under their current business model. That is the management and rental operations of the gas station network. This includes convenience stores and are operated by the dealers, company-owned and dealer-operated stations called CODOs, or company-owned and company-operated stations called CODOs. The dealers own stations and dealer-operated stations, the DODOs, although less profitable than the other models, still derive profits from the franchisee fees and concessions arrangements from the convenience stores and delivery of fuel. All this will end and result in an inevitable destruction of the National Petroleum Marketing Company in the near future with the privatization of the service stations. The management of the service station business is about 70% of NP business, not the distribution of fuel. There are 113 stations in which 75 are company owned. Dealers own the rest. The estimated value of service stations by NP is approximately $1 billion, and approximately each one costing about $5 million to $15 million, depending on the volumes of fuel they sell or at the locations they are. So the government, in its new idea to raise money by selling out NP's prize assets, which is its prime properties with gas stations around our twin island, is a misconceived scheme, to say the least. This sellout will have adverse ripple effects to our economy. There will inevitably be an increase in price fuel with the unregulated retail market, which will have a knock-off effect on the cost of living for citizens in Trinidad and Tobago, such as an increased cost of fuel to the motoring public, increase in traveling by taxis, maxi taxis, and the cost of transport for goods and services. Further, the knock-on effect will affect food prices, grocery prices, delivery prices, and may lead to an increased inflation and more hardship of the population. The privatization of the company's own sites means that it opens up a definite possibility to form cartels on the retail side of the business side, where the Petroleum Dealers Association can set a price with a profit margin that they want to make it higher at the pump. This means transportation, maxi taxis price will hike and can lead to a domino effect where our staple food items and basic grocery items increases. The customers and citizens of Trinidad and Tobago will now be at the mercy of the retailers and can unavoidably lead to a monopoly. And this puts the country's transport system at perils and at the mercy of these cartels. Recently, on the 16th of July in 2021, in a Senate debate, the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, the Honorable Stuart Young, implied that certain NP dealers entered into a lease arrangement with NP on the basis that they would own the NP stations, which he himself referred to as prime real estate. However, this was never fathomed by NP and the management when the stations were tendered for its operation in 2011. The Honorable Minister needs to fact-check his facts as his statements were inaccurate. This move to sell out prime real estate was proposed by the Minister of Finance under the Dr. Keith Rowley-led government in 2020, and the selling off of the stations were devised by the current administration. In my humble view, this may very well lead to the decimation of NPs, and because you have Paria now, and Paria is operating as a wholesaler for fuel, and all fuels can be distributed by privately owned transportation trucks, there is no need for NP anymore. It's hard to understand the move that is basically the sellout of another state enterprise by removing the prime property and assets owned by the state to finance recurring expenses of the government without properly looking at the existing model and ways to maintain sustainable income for the company and its future. In conclusion, NP's profitable business is actually the franchisee arrangement, which includes the rental and management of the service stations and the money derives from that business. It's the shared profit they receive for the operations of the stations, where they receive a percentage of the sales from their lotto machines, from their convenience stores, from the fuel delivery arrangements and the KFC rentals located across the stations, from the various locations across the country. So what the government has proposed is effectively a sellout of the country's prime assets to friends, family, and financiers, and eventually the shutdown of NP, leaving it with no assets to make money in the future and difficult in this market. A more viable option by the government may be to consider putting NP on the local stock exchange and allowing every citizen an opportunity, a chance to own piece of NP with shareholdings in the company. It is part of our legacy, our energy heritage, and a company that has been profitable in the past and can be profitable again under the right management. The Minister of Energy and Energy Industries and our current government must understand our heritage of the energy industry and understand he was put there to preserve the revenue streams of our country and the energy industry. We should not be shutting down another state company, dislocating lives and assets, and destroying another piece of our proud energy heritage of 101 years that belongs to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Under the PP government, the previous board, and the previous management, the Trinidad and Tobago National Petroleum Company was profitable and contributed dividends in 2015 to the government of Trinidad and Tobago to the tune of $27 million. So why can't it be profitable again? It's like the catchphrase that every citizen instantly knows once heard: buying scrap iron and old battery buying. They will be selling off Petrotrin and NP like old scrap iron. I thank you.
Tell the children the truth. Tell the children the truth.
Creating the sense of a terminal at an educational
Tell the children the truth. Tell the children the truth.
Trinidad and Tobago, we reach. We're going through. Never thought it would reach to this. UE economist Dr. Marlene Arts warned that Trinidad and Tobago is, and I quote, hurtling towards a social and economic catastrophe of unimaginable proportions, end of quote. Dr. Arts spoke of the cancerous social decay and our economy being undone, creating the sense of a terminal condition over the nation today. This is where we reach. A nation decaying under this Rowley administration. A nation falling apart. It grieves me. Trinidad and Tobago has become so starved for unemployment opportunities, so difficult to live in, and so pauperized that hapless and disoriented Venezuelans who fled that country are running back home in droves. 700 yesterday. Anywhere but Trinidad and Tobago we reach. This is the legacy of our great country under this PNM administration. Can we compare Rowley or Farris or Imbert to Eric Williams, CLR James, Errol Mahabia, or Gerard Montano? No way. Venezuelans who fled the hardship of that country have decided that they are better off finding work there than here. Many have said, and this is frightening, that Trinidad and Tobago resembles Venezuela as it was on its way to total collapse. We may very well be, as Lloyd Best would say, in a state of pre-collapse. Professor Rhoda Roddock, a former vice principal of UWI St. Augustine campus, has noted that only when a matter is highlighted publicly does the Minister of Social Development provide assistance. She says, in other words, there is no direct link between the Ministry of Social Development and the poor. We wait until it becomes a big problem and somebody chops somebody or beat the child to death or go to the papers, and then they give out a hamper. That's where we reach. That's the intellect of this mentally challenged P&M government. It's their embarrassment to Trinidad and Tobago. The mere fact that our constituency offices have been given out hundreds of hampers weekly to needy constituents, with requests for help in no short supply, can tell anyone with half a brain that many of our citizens are in dire distress. Citizens are hungry. They have run out of money. Their children are falling behind in school. They need some form of sustainable help outside of a one-off food hamper. Does Rowley know how hard it is for a big man to face his family with no paycheck at the end of the month? This government is so out of touch with realities on the ground that their Minister of Social Development had the audacity to say that persons lining up and going through the indignity of begging for food, that they're greedy. Imagine that. This government created the economic hardship being faced by thousands of citizens by shutting down businesses for months and then implying that people don't need hampers, they're greedy. Lord, lend a hand. This problem will increase exponentially in the post-COVID environment, given the disproportionate impact of COVID's measures on the disadvantaged among us. If children of poor families do not have access to computers or Wi-Fi, they will fall behind at school. And we all know how difficult it is for them to catch up with their more favored friends. Trinidad and Tobago has become a country of the rich and the wealthy, not of the poor, and nobody cares. The early childhood centers are left abandoned. And then the children of single-parent mothers will be able to get an educational advantage. The children of the poor will be able to go to these the early childhood centers to get an education. So when they enter the primary school, they are not at a disadvantage compared to the wealthy children who have access to all kinds of Montessori education and etc. It is one way of breaking the cycle of poverty, these early childhood centers. And Kamala Persad-Bissessar must be given credit. And she did receive credit at the United Nations because they saw this as a poverty reduction activity. So the government gives no hope to the citizens, no inspiration for the youth, no future for small businessmen. The PM may very well ask in all sincerity, what is so special about the doubles vendor? He knows about the 1%. No one else matters except friends, families, and financiers. Oh, how Eric Williams must be turning in his grave. If early childhood centers are left abandoned, then the children of single-parent mothers will be at an educational disadvantage when they enter school at age 5. This leads to a cycle of poverty which can permanently damage poorer communities in our country. The government gives no hope to citizens, no inspiration for the youth, no future for small businessmen. The Prime Minister may well ask in all sincerity, what is so special about the doubles vendor? He knows about the 1%, he knows about the wealthy. No one else matters for him except friends, families, and financiers. This is what Trinidad and Tobago has become, a nation surviving on hampers. This is what we call the hamperization of a once thriving regional financial economy. It is sad that Trinidad and Tobago has come to this. Rowley, you really have no shame. This is your legacy. This is what you have done to the once proud citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And yet Rowley narcissistically shows no remorse whatsoever for his government's lack of care and consideration for citizens. The elderly can line up in the rain for vaccine. Who cares? When we ask questions to ensure that every citizen will be able to access some form of assistance during these times, we get no response. The ministry announces grants, and it is almost impossible for the poor to access them. When we ask questions to ensure that they have a way forward after COVID, no response. When we ask questions to hold them accountable for their wastage of taxpayers' dollars, no response. But yet we have a prime minister who continuously justifies Al-Rari's rent money while children are starving, mothers are crying, babies lack milk, and disadvantaged children have limited access to schooling. 1 month's rent paid to Al-Rari's family could feed all the under 15 children in Naparima for 1 month. Does Rowley care? Does Al-Rari care? They have no shame. Can they justify Al-Rari's wife's law firm receiving contracts, and you got the procurement legislation to facilitate this, but ignore children who have no online computer devices? And when you ask about the amounts paid, I am told, why am I interested in Faris's wife? Such ad hominem BS I have never heard from someone who says he is my prime minister. I ask him a serious question about taxpayers' money, and he brings it down to the gutter about Faris Al-Wari's wife. And this is who this self-serving government represents, themselves. A government focused on family, friends, and financiers. A year later, and COVID is still battering our economy. Where is the roadmap for recovery team? The elite team designed to bring ideas, plans, and ensure that Trinidad and Tobago will be on the road to transformation after COVID. Where are they now? Who is advising this government? Mahal, the driver of the vehicle? Fat Man George, smart man? A&V Drilling? Who is advising this government? What are the government's post-COVID recovery policies? Where are the novel, out-of-the-box thinking? Who troubleshoots ideas presented to cabinet? Who recuses and who stays? Can anyone in cabinet stand up to the cabal of young Imbert, Al-Wari, and Rowley? How much power do the backbenchers wield in cabinet? Are we waiting on God's grace? On Papa Niza? Or Dr. Trevor says, for a miracle to save our country? We are calling on the government to urgently establish a poverty alleviation super ministry operating along the line of Brazil's 2013 Bolsa Familia program, which was in essence a cash transfer a program where parents collected a monthly cash transfer in exchange for sending their children to school and making sure they got regular wellness checkups. While it lasted, it has been cancelled by this government, right-wing government. While it lasted, it worked in 3 dimensions: promoting immediate poverty relief, 2, strengthening the exercise of basic social rights, and 3, promoting opportunities for the development of families. We are calling for a government super ministry that will have specific and quantifiable timelines for achieving poverty reduction goals. Something foreign to this clueless government, SMART goals. We need to focus on an all-of-government approach to poverty reduction by coordinating in a serious way the work of the ministries of education. Education is the way up. Health, family and social welfare, labor, public utilities, and food production. Even today, President Biden was loading the fact that he had given among other things, $300 to every child in the United States. Where is our equivalent? If the wealthy United States, they can do that, how many poor, and I speak about real poor children, have received anything from this government other than a food hamper once in 3 months? It is well established that education is a ladder to lift people out of poverty. Over 2,000 students dropped out of school since the pandemic began. Where are they? Who cares? Are they only to be attracted by gang members? When you ask Minister Hines how many who dropped out of school and are eligible to join gangs, he literally says that he didn't know. Many due to lack of access to internet or electronic devices to participate in online classes. It is always the poor who suffer most from all of the decisions made by this administration. This is the government of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. Let me repeat, this is the government of the rich, by the rich, and for the rich. And if you are not rich, then you eat the bread the devil need, or as they say in the dialect, crapo smoke your pipe. COVID isn't leaving us anytime. What is the government's plan to live with COVID? The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced a detailed 5-point plan in hopes of keeping future lockdowns away. Singapore has put forward a bold plan to return to its pre-COVID life. What has Rowley done? Coming every Saturday and ad-libbing our COVID response? According to the World Bank, Trinidad and Tobago's GDP growth for 2020 was minus 7.8%. Haiti was minus 3.4%. Guyana, plus 43%. Venezuela, minus 3.6%. You know what this means? This means that Haiti and Venezuela had a better economic performance than the hapless Imbert. We rich. Haiti did better than us in terms of economic performance. Venezuela did better than us. No wonder the Venezuelans going back home. Foreign exchange shortages plague our small businesses. They have destroyed this sector. So groceries can retail alcohol, but not bars. Even as Fauci tells us that curbside and outdoor sales in sunlight with enforced COVID protocols provide absolutely no risk of infections. Sunlight, Fauci tells us, kills the COVID virus. We are facing the pre-collapse of the energy sector with the closure of Petrotrin and soon Train 1. If we do not deal with poverty, these are the problems that will face us. One, the collapse of the middle class, which always acts as a buffer to class warfare between the rich and the poor. Second problem, problems of social chaos, such as those which exist now in Haiti, in Venezuela, and we see it daily on the streets in Cuba. Three, capital flight. Where did the 400 millions in foreign direct investment go? It's minus in Trinidad, it means capital flight. Four, if we do not deal with poverty, we have increases in gang warfare as misguided youth fight for the remaining crumbs. Five, we have income inequalities as the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So we have the society of two classes. Rich, the financiers, the families, and friends, and the rest of us. We will have a brain drain as our young and educated seek better futures outside of Trinidad. When you talk to the young, bright scholarship winners of Trinidad and Tobago, you have to go out of your way to encourage them to remain here. They're beginning to give up hope. 7, reduce foreign direct investors as investors weigh the downsides of investing in our country in the throes of economic decline. And 8, a society increasingly losing hope as they slowly and surely realize that those in charge of us do not know what they are doing, are operating by vaps and whooping at every ball that comes their way. Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to say this. I love my country. But under Rowley and this PNM administration, Trinidad and Tobago will only head down a road of pauperization, hopelessness, and social decay. We can only hope that the citizens come to their senses and understand that Kamala Prasad Bissessa has what it takes, based on performance and based on vision, to take Trinidad and Tobago out of the morass that we have become. I thank you.
For this government, that appears to be a prop. And for them, COVID, it appears, is like manna from heaven. Because they're blaming COVID for everything. So that is COVID who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That is what they're praying to every day, it appears.
In the image of the United National Congress, UNC Deputy Political Leader, Jerlene John.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you to the many viewers on TV Jagriti and the various social media platforms. Thank you to the UNC supporters and well-wishers. And thank you, Honorable Political Leader. When the Honorable Political Leader addressed us on 5th of June, 2 virtual Mondays ago, she offered words of encouragement and solidarity, in particular with the UNC's supporters and in general, the general Trinidad and Tobago population. Inter alia, she said, I'm proud of my heritage. Be proud of your heritage, whatever it may be. Tonight I tell you, I'm proud to be from Charlottesville, Tobago. I say this to make sense of the front page of the Saturday 17th Guardian newspapers, where it has NGC's $250 million blunder. I read the story and I recalled my grandfather from Charlottesville, Cadman David Murray, looking up into the sky and telling his wife, Louisa Maggie Murray, Maggie, tonight is Kingfish Moon. And having said that, having recognized what he was seeing, and I'll explain to you Trinidadians, it meant that based on how the clouds are looking, the moon is looking, it is a good time to catch kingfish. He didn't say redfish, kingfish. So he would go then, that is the way my grandfather scanned his environment. So he will then go out to the bay, which was very close to where we lived, and he'll pull the seine, Mr. Percy seine, and he'll get some squids, and then he'll prepare his bait. He will then check his little boat to ensure it's well corked. The oars were not broken or cracked, and he will get his lamp, and with the what you call it, the mantles, make sure the mantle was good, the lamp was gassed up, etc. And then Cadman Murray was preparing to go to sea to catch fish. And you see, he had a plan to catch kingfish. At around 6:30 in the evening, Cadman will set out to his kingfish bank. When you look through our window of our house in Charlottesville, we lived right on the beach, you will see the little boat bobbing up. It will be in his exact spot where he can catch kingfish. If he had seen redfish, he'd have gone to another spot. If it was big jacks, he would have gone to another spot. So Cadman was guided by his strategy and his environmental scanning. Almost without fail, he'll come back the next morning, early in the morning, with fish, which he then handed over to my grandmother. That is the division of labor. So my grandmother now, she will look at the fish, she'll put aside for what we are going to eat for the day, she'll cook for the day, she'll put aside what we are going to sell for the day, she'll cut it up. She had no scale, so she weighed it on her hand, 1 pound, 1.5 pounds, 2 pounds. And that was correct, and she gave it the price. And then she'll give it to me and my little brother, Zags, and we'll go and sell it. We were the sellers. That is the division of labor there, right? You have everybody doing what they are good at and what they specialized in. And if the ones to cook, we had the fish that we cook on that day. The ones that there's some she'll put aside, which we will salt and dry, and we have salted fish. So now that was value added. So we had we had all the factors of production. It was salt and labor, which we had in good quantity. So with the salt, the price of that fish went up, value added. So I am proud of my roots. I did not learn business, particularly in business school, which I went to. I have also done accountancy at the professional level. I learned it in Charlottesville. So which brings me to the National Gas Company story, who will digress until we come back to what was reported on Saturday. Under the People's Partnership, return headed by Kamala Prasad Bissessa, returned profits and dividends to its shareholder every single year from 2010 to 2015. You know, and in total over those years in terms of dividends was $13.4 billion, and the taxes was $7 billion. So we are talking about $20 billion or so, well, 21 billion almost over the 5-year period. Now you fast forward to what is happening under this government, and NGC declared losses, and what? The current Minister of Energy went out of his way to say, twisted himself all in a pretzel to say it was the fault of the UNC. So, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is since 2015, the People's Partnership had been out of government. But somehow, it's the UNC's fault that the National Gas Company is making losses. So, you can't make this stuff up. So, just to juggle the current Ministers of Energy's header, if I may read from a Curtis Williams article of April 7, 2021. And this Curtis Williams, he would have gone way back in time, you know, in terms of writing and cautioning. He's the lead editor of business at The Guardian. So he said in April 7th of 2021, anyone who has read this column over the last 2 years will not be surprised by this development. That is of the loss over the last 2 years. So since 2018, 19 and so on, they're flagging this thing. Trinidad and Tobago, which in 2015, when the present government took the reins of power, stood tall as the world's largest exporter of methanol and ammonia. It has now lost over half of its total methanol production and a significant amount of its ammonia output. There is no other way of saying it. The government has a challenging situation and has mismanaged the sector to the point where it appears to be on proverbial life support, with doctors who have neither a diagnosis, far less a treatment plan for the patient. This is not the UNC saying this. This is an independent business editor. On May 12th, 329 days ago, he said, I wrote an article entitled, Save the Petrochemical Sector, in which I warned, that is Mr. Williams, in which I warned that the fallout from the government's action would lead to a disaster at Point Lisas. At that time, I wrote the following, which is perhaps even more relevant than when I first penned it. The NGC, which has the role of aggregator and was expected to supply the gas to the downstream, was short and facing legal challenges. He said, enter Dr. Keith Rowley, and this is where they try to conflate and confuse what the facts are. But again, facts are stubborn things. He said, enter Dr. Rowley. This is not the UNC. This is a reporter, an editor at that, reporting. He met with the leaders of the upstream companies, and when the meeting was over, the NGC signed an agreement that is now proving to be unworkable. He said, for the record, this newspaper more than a year ago warned that the agreement brokered by the Prime Minister was going to have disastrous consequences. Now, ladies and gentlemen, former President Obama, during a speech in Philadelphia last year, and I quote, he said, our democracy is not going to work if people who are supposed to be our leaders lie every day and just make things up. We become just numb to it. We just become immune to it. You know, so they go on and on with this thing instead of trying to find a solution. And I must say that Mr. Williams of The Guardian would have done it beyond his duty in bringing these matters to the fore. So, ladies and, information has come to hand, and we were able to present to the Trinidad and Tobago public what had happened, where the Prime Minister or the politicians who went to Houston negotiated a price that was approximately 20% higher than the price downstream plants pay or can pay for gas. Because, again, it's value added. When you buy an input material, you now have to add that to some others. And when you look at your whole your whole value chain, you have to come out on the other end to make money because you are in business. Any entrepreneur in the private sector particularly will tell you, the first line you read in any business book you open is that people, they put their capital, they will allocate their capital in order to maximize profits. That is all they're in business to do. I mean, if it creates a social good, God bless you. But outside of that, it is really to maximize profit. So there they went to Houston and maximized and negotiated a price that was 20% higher than the price downstream plants pay or can pay for gas. This has resulted in approximately $1.5 billion loss in revenue per year for NGC due to the erosion of the gas margin business. And as I said, it is common knowledge that we have low gas reserves. We had this unprecedented situation where political operatives went and they admitted that they went and got involved in sensitive gas price negotiations. And of course, they keep telling us it is the price is covered, but that was negotiated, is covered by an NDA. It has an NDA protection. What that means? It's a non-disclosure clause, agreement. It's a secret. It is their secret in terms of how they spend your money and what they do with your money. Now, of course, the UNC had plans for the long-term survival of the energy sector. And I want to quote what the honorable political leader would have said before. One reopening of a productive and viable petrotrain refinery, because again we see where the government is saying moving towards what they call liberalization of that sector, of the sector where you get your fuel. And what is going to happen? It is not liberalization at the pump, it is paying at the pump. Because everybody along the way, as my colleague Neil Gosain would have spoken about just now, there was all a markup at every stage along that food chain. You understand? So when it gets to the pump with the common man from Trinidad and Tobago going there to purchase, there is no relief at that pump. So there would be a reopening of a productive and viable petrotrain refinery. There will be a simplification and modernization of production sharing contracts and exploration and production systems, as well as reform of the supplemental petroleum tax. Now, and I'll get into that because they criticize, this current government criticized the government of the People's Partnership when they would have offered incentives to the upstreamers to go and extract this natural gas. And now 3, before I go on, aggressively support the use of alternative energy sources such as solar and wind energy and explore the prospect of developing a regional effort for the long-term sustainability of our energy supply. We would provide appropriate incentives to encourage the development of an industry to provide energy-saving solutions. So never mind the advice from local economists, noting over and over voices crying in the wilderness, noting that in the current budget, it gives no indication of where the much-needed new streams of forex will be coming from. Every year, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, it's all like ring, ting, ting, hear this thing, my boyfriend promised to give me something. Nothing. There is nothing, right? They do no work, they have no ideas, and it's all about wait on the Lord, be of good courage, and something good is going to happen to you today, right? No work. But the good computer term that we learned a long time ago, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So there are 2 main issues really coming out of this NGC $250 million blunder. The current natural gas shortages are directly attributable to the failure of the PNM to engage stakeholders and multinationals in new and successful bid rounds. Any new gas from 2012 to today has been as a direct result of what, under the management of the People's Partnership Government, that led administration. That is what they are enjoying to this day. They have done nothing to increase the uptick in gas production, and they keep doing just that. Nothing. Because as you know, the Fabulous Two, they went to Caracas and they wind down for some kind of dragon deal until today. They can't, because that, in terms of their own progress, that has been stopped by the US initiated sanctions. So that project, whether it was a go or a stay, it really is now on indefinite pause. The multinationals are refusing to undertake any new explorational development because the government refused to renew the 2011 fiscal incentives. And any concession which led to the unprecedented surge of activity in exploration in 2011 and 2015, that is now off the card. And of course, the folks who are now in charge are simply too arrogant and too incompetent to listen to any ideas. And of course, it gets worse, because why are we talking about this $250 million cost, which is really like just throwing money away. You see, why did NGC undertake a complete refurbishment, complete refurbishment cost of $250 million when they only have a 10% stake in Train 1? Why? Now the hapless Minister of Energy is saying negotiations are still ongoing. With whom? These are not Mickey Mouse people. The multinationals are not here to play. They are here to maximize and to make their contribution to the bottom line at head office, whether in Houston or London or wherever it is located. So to somebody who is self-inflated and high on their own supply, talking about negotiation, nobody are negotiating with you. They don't have time with you. If your strategy doesn't fit into theirs, they don't have time for that. So I don't know, putting out this press release on Saturday when it was, one doesn't know who is he negotiating. Is he in a room talking to himself? I mean, the silence is deafening, because there's the NGC chairman, and I think this was very, very courageous of this NGC chairman, who was a former Minister of Energy himself. He advised Mr. Williams when he asked, he said, ask the cabinet. So really and truly, I think Mr. Enhill is perhaps saying, wink, wink. You understand? This is not a matter for me. This is way above my pay grade. So this, so they throw away money down the drain, but that is not all. It appears to be a pattern of behavior at the NGC. I mean, today, vendors can't open in Port of Spain. The front page of every newspaper celebrating the fact that we can enjoy doubles again. Imagine that. We're just happy to get some simple pleasures. You understand? But there we have our pride and joy. There we have our pride and joy, just going about their business as they see fit. As they see fit, right? Mothers on the front pages of newspapers crying for food for their children, nothing. Children without devices or data for over 16 months, nothing, right? The minister himself sent 14 refurbished computers to the children of Belmont in his own constituency. He could not even have gifted them with new computers. So, Mr. Williams has said that he sent 5 calls. He sent 6 questions to the Honourable Minister of Energy, and then he sent 6 questions via email, and then he followed up with 5 phone calls, all of which went unanswered. Now, Mr. Young did not assist Mr. Curtis Williams. I want to assist Mr. Curtis Williams. Question number 1, when was the decision taken to decommission Train 1? The answer is no decision has been taken to decommission Train 1 at this time. There were various scenarios which were given to the board, and they are sitting now, as I understand it, on the Minister of Energy's desk for a sign-off. That is, should the plant be decommissioned, which is the recommendation from the NGC, they are saying decommission the plant. Or should more money be pumped into it, into further life extension? Question 2. Approximately $35 million has been committed and spent on phase 1 of Train 1 turnaround. No, the question was how much money would have been spent on the turnaround. And it is approximately 35 million. What the front page said, 250 million has already been spent. Question 3, is that money now lost? How much money was lost? The answer is all. No coming back. That money, that 250 million is sunk, is gone. Question 4, was the decision to pursue operating Train 1 driven by economics? The management went to the board with no economics. And I was told there were dissenting views. That's what I understand at the board level, which resulted even in one director stepping down. There was no economics to drive the decision to operate Train 1. NGC was told by the upstreamers that there was no gas for Train 1. And they had, in addition to which, they had no offtake contracts for LNG. So where is the economics? There's no input and output, but there's an investment of approximately $250 million with the potential for it to move up to over $1 billion TT dollars. So who is to be held accountable? What was the process used to hire the commercial VP, I think, who is in charge of putting these or doing the scenario analysis or maybe running the numbers to see where you get the best IRR, the best internal rate of return? Who is that person? So what about the president of NGC? What is happening? This cannot just happen and there are no consequences. You know, I recall with this all $2.1 billion loss, the former Minister of Energy, he had talked about, oh, don't worry about it. We are going to recover the money by some 1.25% royalties that we have been imposed on the upstreamers. That again was just the normal P&M dance and prance and rubbish. That never happened. Or it happened in that the upstreamers did pay it to the ministry, but that money had to be repaid or returned by the National Gas Company. So National Gas Company never got it, but they had to pay it. So they have now lost millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. They are now being told, go to the downstreamers. They are the ones who are doing, producing the urea and ammonia and methanol, etc. Go to them and see if you can get it. You see, this is a government. I wouldn't even say with no plans. I just find they're just bold-faced. They're just bold-faced, right? So this ties, you see, NGC now, you know, just throw money away. So the N in NGC is most likely for non-profit organization. They are not about returning to maximize shareholders' equity. They are not about that. The N in their business is about non-profit organization. So, and it continues because what they have done, well, not too long ago, in terms of how they allocate their money and what they do in terms of returning in maximizing your shareholders' profit. They took a 20% investment position, which is worth $45 million US, in one upstream project in a place called Block 1A, right? That's offshore west, on the west coast of Trinidad, with a company by the name of De Novo Energy. Now, again, from what I understand, NGC is now trying to get out of that deal, and it has made no real returns for the NGC. Zero, or maybe next to zero. It appears that the NGC's business model is not an aggregator anymore, but a facilitator. Now, what this aggregator is that you like a middleman. You stand in the middle, and the gas comes to you, and you take it from the upstreamers, you buy it from the upstreamers, you sell it to the downstreamers. And that, whatever that spread is your profit, right? And they have been doing very well. They were doing very well up to 2015. You know why they were doing very well until 2015? You had a prime minister who knew her place as a prime minister. She knew what her job was. You had a minister who knew his place as a minister, who will defer to the professionals, the people working it every day, who went to school and studied it. They know what this energy business is about. But no, you have some fella, hot and sweaty, running up in people's business because they have power. They have power. You know, they have power. And because of that, they will just exercise that power in places that they know nothing about. So here it is that the NGC invested in this initiative 20%, $45 million US. You can multiply that by 7 or thereabouts to know what the TT is. And now they have nothing to get. It is all gone. Gone. Nothing to get. So I say, what is happening now? their parent company for Devono Energy, they are now getting a straight pass where that energy is going straight to them. It's going straight to them. Now, that is not a business model for NGC. NGC is supposed to be the middleman. But here you have another company taking that, the gas is going straight from this upstreamer into this downstreamer. Now, I want to understand what is happening with NGC in this. I say good for the parent company because they are making, I suppose, their commercial consideration, they're okay, right? I really want to know who will be held accountable for this 45 million US dollars. Who is the minister who instructed that this deal be done? Or is it the president of NGC or the commercial VP? Also, can the current Minister of Energy confirm who gave the instruction on the gas pricing for the deal, and also that NGC should sell the gas at the same price they pay for it? Now, this, you can't make this stuff up. This is an NGO. This cannot be NGC. NGC is a not-profit organization. So the same price you buy the gas at, you have to just pass it on. And this deal was done at a time when Mr. Khan was around, all right? And so when Mr. Khan was around, and Mr. Khan at the time, deceased, had said marginal fields, which was this block 1, it was a marginal field, gives marginal returns. And NGC should not be involved in that investment. That was the line minister who said that. But of course, we knew that he was not the de facto minister. All right? We knew that he wasn't the de facto minister. Mr. Khan, to all intents and purposes, was just a ventriloquist. Right? So we want to know who approved that deal. So NGC invested money for which their business model dictates. You sell at the same price in which you buy, and you make no profits, and that is okay. And everybody else along there comfortable in their job, and no head will roll, and nobody taking any calls, nobody responding to any emails, and the beat goes on. So, ladies and gentlemen, question 5 was, what were the central issues? Lack of natural gas, safety, and was it environmental? Central issues, as stated before, natural gas production is on the decline, so there's no gas for a 4th train. So what the NGC is saying, listen, we are probably on the indifference curve. All you have train 1, 2, 3, 4, all you only have gas to operate 3. Today. So it doesn't matter, you could take out train 1 or you could take out train 4. That's a matter for you. You have to make the commercial decision, but they have to be guided by something, by scenario analysis, etc. So there is no gas. So the optimal operation is for 3 train. The LNG plant has one of the higher greenhouse gas emissions when recently benchmarked against other plants around the world. And with BP and Shell pursuing a green agenda, and only this weekend we would have seen where West Europe, Germany, Belgium, floods just wash out whole communities. You've been told that in West USA that fires are burning 1,000 acres per minute. That is climate change. The President Angela Merkel, Premier Angela Merkel, was in these communities this weekend. So their whole intention, their whole business model is changing. And then you had President Biden talking about his green agenda, and that by 2030, they are going to change 50% into green energy. And all of Europe is looking on the same way. So I asked the PNM, what are we doing in terms of new gas? What about the Manatee project or the side of the dragon that you can do? And I end with Mr. Curtis Williams, Guardian 7/2021. Members of this government are experts at paltering, and they try to rewrite history. Unfortunately, in the days of the digital age, it is not so easy to take back what was said. In preparing to write this article, this is Mr. Williams, I reread Mr. Khan's address to the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Conference of 2017. I invite everyone to read it, for it really shows the extent of promises that never materialize. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so much.
Over the past 6 years, we have seen attempts by the government, PNM government, to erode our democracy and infringe on the rights of citizens. This government is moving to change the law to really, I think, to put in place their hand-picked commission of police.
You will never stop fighting for me when I can't fight for myself. Every word is a promise you keep, 'cause you love me like nobody.
Right now, from the leadership of the United National Congress, the first woman Prime Minister, the first woman Attorney General, the first woman to lead a parliamentary political party, the first woman opposition leader. Let's welcome Kamla Prasad Bisesa, Senior Counsel.
You will never stop fighting for me, fighting for me.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for another virtual report. I want to thank all our previous speakers this evening and all proud UNC soldiers. I always look forward to speaking with you at these virtuals. One day we shall meet again in person, but in the meantime I must thank William Archie and Atlantic Computers for assisting us in getting our message across, giving our reports to you. So as I speak to you tonight, our concerns continue to grow. Yes, we have a health pandemic, but it is clear that the Rowley regime has taken us into a complete economic pandemic. Today, we are very close to 1,000 deaths being recorded from COVID. I express sympathies to the families of all they have lost their loved ones. I again call on government to make changes to their failed health team. I called for changes when we had just 600 deaths. But fake outrage, hyper-offended boners and groaners of the PNM had meltdowns. Look at this guy. He's in charge of the Ministry of Health. Take a look at this video, please.
Together we aspire, together we achieve. That's our national anthem. No, that's our watchwords. National anthem is discipline, production, and tolerance.
Since we called for changes, we have had over 400 more deaths with no transparency, no accountability whatsoever, and this failed Minister of Health and his team. Our question remains, how many more must die before we make changes to the failed plans of the Minister of Health and his government? In our country, we have a party in power who seems to be filled with con men who have an inflated sense of uniqueness, an unwarranted sense of entitlement, and overly emotional, easily offended, and unable to deal with opposing opinions. They attack the UNC. They attack every person who dares to raise a voice to call for changes. They attacked me for advice regarding sunlight for COVID-19. But please take a look at this video now. I told you that I want you to look at this person who's in charge of the Minister of Health. Please check out a video of the Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Archie. So, since we called for changes, we have had over 400 more deaths with no transparency, no accountability whatsoever, and this failed Minister of Health and his team. Our question remains, how many more must die before we make changes to the failed plans of the Minister of Health and his government? In our country, we have a party in power who seems to be filled with con men who have an inflated sense of uniqueness, an unwarranted sense of entitlement, and overly emotional, easily offended, and unable to deal with opposing opinions. They attack the UNC. They attack every person who dares to raise a voice to call for changes. They attacked me for advice regarding sunlight for COVID-19. But please take a look at this video now. I told you
false. Sunlight kills the virus.
It does. That's a truism. That's one of the reasons why outside in the sun, when you are interacting, that is much, much better than being inside.
Again, stay out of the recirculated air. It's better to be outside and in the open air, sunlight, better than more recirculated air inside.
Exactly. And that's the reason why one of the 4 or 5 things that we say are important is outside is always better than inside.
Okay.
And that's why when restaurants open, if they open, you encourage tables that are outside and separated from each other.
Is this why do you think that so many of the island countries have such low numbers? Because they have more of an outdoor lifestyle?
It's quite conceivable that that's the case. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should export the opposition leader as an anti-COVID product in this pandemic. Go out there and tell the world, sunshine does kill COVID.
You would recall they talked about building a dome. None other than the member for Siparia came out, build a dome. COVID will be killed in sunlight, etc.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, it wasn't my honorable colleague, the member of St. Joseph, who tried to lull citizens into complacency by telling them sunlight does kill COVID.
Can I talk about sunlight? Sunlight is great. We are so blessed. The climate we have is one of the best in the world. And I repeat again, sunlight will kill COVID-19.
Sunlight kills the virus.
It does. That's the truth.
Sunlight kills the virus.
It does. That's the truth.
Sunlight kills the virus.
It does. That's a truism.
Today. Thank you, Mr. Archie. So we said sunlight will kill COVID. Now the science in the world is telling us the very same thing. I want you to remember that when citizens stand up and demand accountability from the Minister of Health, they do nothing. I think we all need to stand up now. Don't wait until one of your loved ones, a person you love, passes away because of the incompetence of the Minister of Health. Ask the question, if 900 people had died in 3 months from crime, would Gary Griffith still have a job? Why then do we have this failed medical team with Minister Diyal Singh? How many public servants over the years who have been deemed UNC have been fired, have been refused promotion, have been hounded out of office by the PNM mob? Only public servants who parrot PNM propaganda are exempt from accountability in this country. The mismanagement by the failed Ministry of Health team has had repercussions throughout our economy. You know, this week we saw persons by the hundreds, Venezuelans, who had come to Trinidad and Tobago looking for a better place because we were like a paradise. They are now fleeing. Venezuelans are actually lining up by the hundreds to escape Trinidad and Tobago. Imagine when they fled from their country because they could not find jobs or food. They're now saying, you know what? Between Maduro and Rowley, we choose Maduro. We are going back to Maduro. Take a look at this video clip of Venezuelans lining up to flee Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Mr. Archie. You know what many Venezuelans who are here tell us? They say that they're seeing what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. They've seen it happen before. Where did they see it? They saw it in their own land in Venezuela with a dictatorial regime which destroyed a major oil and gas economy piece by piece. That's what happened in Venezuela. They were a major oil producer. They were one of the largest in the world. They had the largest reserves, and they were reduced, taken down, destroyed piece by a dictatorial regime headed by Maduro. So now they did the same thing there. When they were dismantling that oil and gas sector, they blamed the opposition. Sounds familiar? That is what has been happening here. They say that Rowley is doing to TNT, the Venice tell us, in the same way that Maduro did to Venezuela. There is not a single sector of our economy which Rowley has not demolished. He destroyed our oil and gas sector. Today, we have junkyards across the country. Petrotrin is a scrapyard. At Pointe-a-Pitre, you go down to Point 14, you even go to Santa Flora, all these places have become ghost places, turned into scrapyards and ghost towns, junkyards across the country. And you know what's happening at Point Lisas as well? That's the next junkyard in the making, all because of the incompetence and failed policies of the Rowley regime. Throughout this lockdown, we have seen the reality of the Rowley's economic policy. The Rowley economic plan is called Friends and Financiers and the Tax Plan. Once you are a P&M friend and financier, and once you're indeed a Rowley friend and financier, then you don't have to pay taxes. You don't have to go through. There's one way, one rule for everybody else, and another rule for their friends, families, and financiers. The Rowley government continue to ignore the economic pandemic that we are facing today in our country. Any MP, any councillor, and any human being, right-thinking citizen in this land, will tell you how overwhelmed we are with requests for just food, basic food. They're not asking for laptops anymore. They're not asking for any fancy anything. They're asking for just basic food. That's where we've been reduced to. And you know what? It's not only the Venezuelan refugees who are fleeing our country. Foreign direct investment is also leaving our country. If you look at the latest reports, you will see that we have had the worst outlook in the entire Caribbean region for foreign direct investment. We are attracting negative investments. What does this mean? Negative investments, just a word, but what it means, instead of money coming in, direct investment coming in, direct investment is leaving, so we're getting negative outflows of monies in a country that once we had the highest FDI recorded in our history under the government I led. Now we are seeing investors are fleeing. Months ago, we had a motion of no confidence in the Minister of Finance, and we were doing that to highlight how bad our economy has become, the pandemic that is our economy. That was our way of warning the country, and now investors are packing their bags and saying adios, saying goodbye Trinidad and Tobago, goodbye Keith Rowley. We look at reports carried in The Guardian yesterday. This was the United Nations on Trade and Development reports, which reviews FDI, foreign direct investment globally. And in that latest report, they place Trinidad and Tobago as the worst in the region. As if that's not bad enough. We are second worst in the world among small island developing states. That's where we've come under the Rowley government. And this didn't happen overnight. This didn't happen in the last year because of COVID. From the time the Rowley regime came into office, we have had negative, minus FDI, and I'll share some of the statistics with you in a moment. So the reality is now, both local and foreign investors have lost faith in the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Haiti is now placed better than TNT. Based on the same report, they're in a better position. Can you imagine with their social unrest, with their economic situation, what it is, and we know one of great hardship, they have done better than Trinidad and Tobago. Haiti. Look at where Trinidad and Tobago has reached under this Rowley regime. Under this Rowley regime, we see all the symptoms of economic collapse, economic pandemic. The NIB data has revealed for us that same NIB the reports that the Minister of Finance tried to hide until someone actually took him to court. 2 years of NIB reports being hidden, despite requests for the reports to be laid in Parliament, as is mandated by law. It tells us that since the Rowley government came into office, over 112,000 jobs have been lost. And it is more than that, because the NIB data only covers workers who were paying NIS. There are a lot of workers in this country, in the informal sector, who do not pay NIS, whether through their own faults or through the faults of their employers. So the 112,000 in the years since they've come into office, I can boast that the government I led had the highest level of employment and had the largest number of persons employed in the history of our country. We look at economic stagnation. We see decline in GDP being at its lowest ever in our history under the Rowley regime. The government I led had amongst this, I think we were the second highest, if not the first, for the level of our GDP. The main sector, energy sector, has collapsed with the shutdown of Petrotrin, the losses at NGC due to the misnegotiations of the Minister Young, who is now the Minister of Energy, and the Prime Minister himself. When they flew up to Houston, Prime Minister boasting to the country, I'm the country's best salesman. The misnegotiations have further damaged irretrievably our energy sector. So they outsmarted themselves in Houston in the gas negotiations. We cannot refine our own gas. We shut down Petrotrin. We have no energy security. Another factor to look at in terms of the economy and the economic pandemic we are in now. Foreign reserves at crisis low levels. Forcing government, you know what they did? To change the law to allow them to borrow in foreign denominated saving bonds. As bad as that. And another day, we did speak before and we'll speak again about the level of debt that this government has accumulated through borrowings, both domestic and foreign borrowings. So foreign reserves are down. I can boast that when we left office, we had amongst the highest level of foreign reserves in the country. Foreign investment and local investors are now sending their money elsewhere, as FDI, as I say, is negative 3 billion TT dollars last year, and almost in the total years of the PNM government, 9.5 billion TT dollars under the Rowley regime. And don't let them fool you that it is because of COVID. I mentioned it earlier and I will repeat it. Since it came into office, FDI has been decreasing until it went into minus negative levels. In our country's history, under the government I led, we recorded the highest ever FDI in our history, totaling US $10.38 billion. And that $10.38 billion will convert into a lot of our TT billions, 10.7, over $70 billion TT in foreign direct investment. So 10 billion under our watch, about. Under their watch is in the reverse. It's negative 9 point something TT billion. Ours was 10 point something US billion coming into our country. Under the government I led, as I said before, we had the highest number of persons with jobs. We had the highest foreign reserves at about US $11.5 billion. They've reduced that down to less than half of that amount. So what is embarrassing for the economic management of our country is we perform poorly when compared to Haiti, as I pointed out before. And if you have, here you have it, Haiti experienced a myriad of societal and economic challenges, has outperformed Trinidad and Tobago. Let that sink in. Understand what that means, and it's not because of COVID, it is because we have a Rowley government in charge. When you look at the small island developing states, again, we are second in the world. Second worst in the world, not second 1 and 2, but second worst in the world for foreign direct investment. So based on the data from the same UNCTAD report, when considered with the general poor performance of the Rowley regime, it paints its own picture of an economic pandemic. Taking a data point at the end of 2019, therefore, there was COVID within our borders, but before that, let's listen to this. Total merchandise exports in millions of US dollars declined from, under my watch, $10.748 billion in 2015 to $7.975 billion in 2019. Declined by almost 25.8% under the Rowley regime. Let's look at total services exports. This also fell very drastically. Under my watch in 2015, total services exports US $1.125 billion. Under the Rowley government, as at 2019 before COVID, US $772 million. From US $1.125 billion under my watch, fell in 2019 to US $772 million, a decline here of 31.3%. This is clear that our economy has declined, is on the verge of collapsing, and that we are in economic pandemic under the Rowley government. Then we got a really bad news, I think it was yesterday, over the weekend, from a Guardian report about Atlantic LNG. Bad news, mothballing of Atlantic LNG. The report in the Guardian tells us that this Atlantic LNG train could be mothballed and stay out of service for 2 years. Now, I want you to remember, I told you last week, we have had one of the oldest oil industries in the world, over 100 years. They've killed that. But natural gas, and gas was the up-and-coming sector. There was a point when we were the highest exporter, or the exporter of the most amount of LNG to the eastern seaboard of the United States. We were that good. So gas had started to take up where oil was falling, and we were doing very well with LNG. And now when you mothball this plant, you can see what's going to happen to our economy. You're going to see what's going to happen to monies being earned from exports. Again, a nightmare and a disaster. The Guardian article referred to this issue as an embarrassment for the Keith Rowley government. Greater than this, the impact will be a catastrophe for our economy. The flagship company, NGC, will not be able to withstand the financial shock. This is the result of several issues. Let's go into them. One, Keith Rowley's failed misnegotiations with the energy majors, where he tinkered with the pricing arrangements for the companies along the natural gas value chain. Again, that was the Houston trip, the greatest salesman and so on. When he was a great salesman, he sold out the country by misnegotiating gas prices, which has affected the whole natural gas value chain and severely impacted on our economy. Secondly, with this mothballing of Atlantic LNG, resultant departures from Point Lisas by several operators, again reducing the profitability of NGC. Thirdly, the absence of any serious plan by the Rowley government to deal with curtailment, except, of course, the now failed Dragon gas deal as one of the 6 game changers. That's game over for that deal. 4, loss of faith in the economic fortunes of the operations of NGC by major shareholders Royal Dutch Shell and BPTT as a result of gas curtailment. And 5, the appointment of a new energy minister who has already failed in his previous posting as National Security Minister, and whose only claim to fame is his proximity to be the girlfriend partner or the companion of the Prime Minister. I see now we're opening the airport, and now this Minister of Energy has to go to the airport to visit, to do whatever he does. So he's like the minister, we want to call it the all-purpose minister. Minister in everything and of everything, and gets nothing done. You say a jack of all trades, a master of none. So you now have a minister who's failed in his previous ministries, now as the Minister of Energy. Let's look at the report put out by the Central Bank, their latest monetary policy report, issued on July 16, 2021. What are the key takeaways from this report? 1, domestic activity contracted. Well, no one is surprised, in the fourth quarter of 2020 last year by 20.9% on a year-on-year basis due to sharp declines in the energy sector. 2, the domestic energy sector experienced a further decline in output over the past 4 months of 2021. Activity also in the non-energy sector also declined by 2.2% in the fourth quarter of 2020. Natural gas production, which has been falling, continued to fall by 20.6% in January to April 2021 compared to the same period year on year from last year. This decline, coupled with the Prime Minister's missteps in the energy sector, have contributed to devastating conditions, and now rumored mothballing of Atlantic LNG Train 1. Our economy is in a tailspin. The Rowley government has, in response, dusted off their playbook. From 2015 to 2020, they have decided to invent ways to blame the UNC and anybody else for their obvious failures. When this does not work, the Prime Minister resorts to raising red herrings so that the national attention can easily shift from his anger with his mismanagement. And if that red herring is not enough, then he bluntly buffs the journalists, all those people who go to these press conferences to ask questions at the press conferences. It's like a buffing session that goes on. Don't ask. Don't ask. And this is what we've seen under the Rowley regime. The economy is in a state of collapse. They have no plans. They've shared nothing with us as to how we will recover. No plans from them. And they're just go on hoof, making policy decisions on hoof without any real science, any real data, or without any real vision for a mission to rescue Trinidad and Tobago. Last week I shared with you some of our plans to kickstart the economy during and post-pandemic. I will restate these now. 1, reduce the tax burden, both personal income tax and corporate taxes. 2, revise the VAT regime in order to take the VAT off food items. I said we did it. It worked. Over 7,000 food items, no VAT. So lower personal tax, lower income tax, corporate taxes, reduce the VAT on food items, and of course, please pay the businesses their VAT refunds. Why are you holding on to monies that belong to the businessmen in our country? Why? That is not your money. That is like you're using their money as a loan, as your own money, refusing to pay VAT refunds. Please pay VAT refunds to the businesses in our country. Jumpstart food security. I discussed at length on the last day about that booster shot that I'd shared with you. Further, restart a reformed oil refinery to regain fuel security. And even more important, as a booster, invest in renewable energy. This is the way to go. The world is going into renewable energy, and that's where we need to go. We all know we have one of the best regions in the world. We live in a climate zone that is one of the best for renewable energy. We have wind, we have water, and of course, yes, we have sunlight. So we have all these renewable energy resources we can tap into to take our country forward. And then I also discussed with you that we should create 3 funds to mobilize the financial resources needed to help us jumpstart the economy. These plans will no doubt help to get our economy back on track and on a stable path. The Rowley regime has always had no sustainable, viable, people-centered plans. The pandemic has proved that for a whole generation, they have taken us backward. Everything always goes out of control under the PNM. Today, I say our great party, the UNC, is stronger than ever. We have rebuilt our party. We have transformed our party to have a modern, inclusive party built on rewarding merit. They cannot take that away from you. Our party is out every single day in the trenches, fighting this incompetent and wicked Rowley government. We will remain resolute in our commitments for a better nation. I am proud of my UNC family, and I will never shy away from defending you. I love every one of you, our members, who have stood by us throughout it all. I ask you today, in spite of the darkness and the despair around us in this pandemic, do not lose hope. Do not ever, ever give up hope. Remember always, you're worried, but rest assured that we are fighting for you. We will continue to fight for you day and night. God bless you, and thank you very much.